All right. So I think we can get started. So hello everyone. Very excited to welcome you today here with a very great panel. Actually, I'm the only one who doesn't speak Danish probably in this panel and not the only non-Danish. So I'm very excited to moderate it and also take you through what are the learnings from the Danish industry that we've been seeing overall in the past years. First of all, a quick introduction also from myself. I'm Iris. I'm one of the original co-founders of Renoon, and currently I'm serving as CEO of the company. The company is a Danish and Italy-based company. I really started the company because of the big need and wave of legislation that is coming up in the space, but really looking into the innovation aspect and how do you really streamline and utilize technology for these specific topics. So today, our biggest, let's say, passion, but also the biggest part of our technology looks into the space of digital product passports. So Renoon is currently has also been recognized by the UN as a digital product passport solution, and we've been working with more than 30 companies throughout Europe to really help them implement and take digital product passport to the next stage, which for a lot of companies has been sort of pilot stage. We're really taking it into a really full-scale solution that can actually be implemented because the legislation is actually coming. And getting into this, the legislation is coming. What legislation is coming? So today we actually have a very great lineup of guests. So I want you to meet the panel, and the first person we're going to start with is going to be Marie. Marie has been CSO of DM&T now for some time. So she's been looking into really like the back end and kind of really helping also companies in Danish space navigate what is currently happening with legislation. And there's a lot of evolutions happening. So Marie, we also had this first sort of touch base of legislation and regulations when we were in November in Copenhagen in person. So that was a really great moment. We had a lot of companies join us there. And we have some updates, right? So I'll actually welcome you first and get you into really an understanding of what are the changes and what is coming up.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting to this panel. So what I will try to do is to, over the next maximum of 10 minutes, give you an overview of the legislation to come when we talk about textiles and sustainability. And considering the amount of legislation, I will have to cut a few corners in the following two slides, which I will use to sort of tell the story. Now, in order to understand the current legislative train that is coming, I think we need to start with the EU Green Deal targets, the Circular Economy Action Plan from 2019, and not least the EU Textile Strategy, which was launched in 2022, and the vision that it contains, because the textile strategy is a policy document that outlines a vision for the textile industry and the ecosystem surrounding the textile industry. So it tells us that in 2030, all textile products must meet a number of criteria. They must be durable, repairable, and recyclable, and to a large extent produced by recycled fibers, free from hazardous substances, etc. And in addition to defining these criteria for the products themselves, the industry also says that in the future textile industry, producers have to take responsibility for their products when they become waste. We need to have a thriving ecosystem driven by sufficient capacities for fiber-to-fiber recycling, and incineration and landfilling of textiles is reduced to a minimum. So what the EU textile strategy does is that it describes a system change from linear to circular. So what the EU textile strategy does then, that it points to a number of regulations and initiatives that will have to come in place in order for this system change actually to happen. because it is a rather big change, and there's not one policy or one piece of legislation that will be able to actually drive this change. So in this slide that you can see right now, we've tried to make an overview of the various value chain aspects that will be changed going forward. And most of the legislations that are listed here are either in process, and that can be in development if it's a new legislation being developed, or it can also be current legislation being revised. So if we look at the left-hand side, we have the design and production phase. I think I won't go into details with everything, but I will call out some of the key legislation files that we are following. And again, this is not a complete overview of all what is going on, but focusing on those files and those legislations that are particularly important for our industry. And there I have to mention the eco-design for sustainable products regulations, because that's a key regulation that is being developed right now, and which on the one hand side will contain these obligatory requirements for all products moving into or being sold at the EU market. So on the one hand, we have performance criteria in terms of durability, recycled content, but it would also be, or it can also be, information requirements on the footprint of the product. That means moving to the next sort of column, which is transparency and traceability. There would not be one law asking for transparency and traceability, but it will be a key issue going across a number of these legislation to come. So in the ESPR, we have a requirement that for the digital product passport that Iris just spoke to, which means that it will be a data carrier for all this product information, both the performance information and documenting compliance with the performance requirements, but also the information requirements on the footprint. And that requires traceability, it requires transparency into the data, which of course requires a lot of your work from your side. And then we have, in addition to these requirements and criteria into transparency and traceability, we also have, on the other hand, the end of product life, which means that producers will be responsible not only for the products in the design and in the production, but also when the products become waste. So we have a extended producer responsibility for textiles coming up, which basically means that from now on, it will be the brands, the producers that are responsible for the collecting of textiles, post-consumer textile, sorting of textiles, and also the recycling of textiles. So that would be a complete change in terms of ownership to waste and an extension of the textile value chain as we know it right now. So in short, we have a lot of product legislation coming from design and production and actually until the product become waste. Then on the right-hand side, we have a column called it company level legislation, because it does not go into the details of what is required at the product level, but detailed requirements into how the company works with sustainability. So we have the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. We have the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, and also forced labor regulation. As you can see, in the end, we also have the omnibus. And we cannot talk about future legislation without talking about the omnibus, because it has proposed changes to particularly the CSRD and the CSDDD, the Due Diligence Directive. It does not mean that the legislation will not come, but there will be some tweaks and changes in terms of scope, because of the, you can say, the simplicity discourse, which we also see going on at the EU level as it is right now. So product legislation and company legislation will come. And can you go to the next slide? Because then I will give a short status on each of the slides. So we have the ESPR, the Eco Design for Sustainable Product Regulation, which I spoke to right now. It has been adopted as a regulation as such. And in process, we have right now a delegated act for textiles, which means that would be the key file where the actual criteria for textiles will be developed. And as you can imagine, that's a difficult process, so it takes some time. As it is right now, there's sometimes a slight delay, so we do expect the delegated act to be ready for compliance in 2028, and with that also the digital product passport requirements on the digital product passport and also information requirements in the digital product passport. And again, I won't go into all the details right now, but as you can see, most of the legislation have been either adopted or is in implementation or in process. And the omnibus has particularly focused on the company level legislation, but we have not seen any changes in terms of the product legislation that is coming right now. So one other key legislation that I talked to is the extended producer responsibility for textiles, which also is in process right now, and which has been, since I spoke the last time, it has been adopted at the EU level and approved by the Commission. And right now we have 20 months, less than 2 years in each of the member states to prepare ourselves for a system where we actually have collection, sorting, recycling, etc. Within each member states on textiles, specifically on textiles. So each of these files requires immense work from the industry and from organizations behind the industry in order to support the legislation. So how do you prepare for all this? Again, we are, and I will explain it a little bit more later. One of the key questions that we get as an industry association is how can we prepare for this? We know that legislation is coming, but we don't know the exact details of the legislation. So how do we prepare? And I think that for the eco-design legislation, we don't know the exact criteria, but we know that durability, recyclability, repairability, and recycled content are some of the key things that is being discussed again and again and again. Starting to prepare processes for how to document durability, recyclability, and how the product can be repaired is definitely worth spending time on and preparing for. Secondly, the whole space about product traceability and transparency. As I mentioned before, it is a cross-cutting issue that cuts across many of the different files. So preparing for how you can get product data, product environmental information is also a key recommendation from our side. And as part of that, mapping your supply chain and engaging with your suppliers, because it is in the supply chain where you need to get this data. Risk assessment, due diligence processes in order to understand where are the hotspots in your company, where do we need to, or where do you need to focus your efforts is also something that cuts across a number of the various legislation, the reporting directive, but also the due diligence directive. And even though many of the Danish brands are not directly in scope of these two files, they will be indirectly in scope via customer requirements. And finally, digitalization of ESG data will be key because there's so much data requirements, so many things going on. So managing this manually will be a highly cumbersome process. So definitely working with how to streamline processes for data collection, data communication is also a key area where you can start to prepare. So I think I don't want to spend any more time on this. There are much more details about this, but maybe we can take some questions later, and otherwise feel free to reach out for me for details on this.
Yeah, Marie, thank you. We already have a question for you, which we'll take on later, seeing how time allows. Thank you so much for giving us a little bit of an overview. So, what we are seeing is that there's some legislation that is progressing at the right speed that was anticipated, and others that have been seeing some changes. Overall, what is interesting and what is the topic for today's panel as well has been really what we've been seeing, at least also from the outside of Denmark, that Denmark is a country that has planted a lot of seeds, especially when it comes to a lot of the sustainability structuring and investing in different projects. Um, Although the seeds were planted, now the climate has changed. So the flowers and everything that we had expected from these seeds to appear maybe need to be readjusted because the climate is different. Peter, I want to start from you now and go with you. You've been CEO of Magasin du Nord. You've seen also the company as an establishment within the Danish industry. You see a lot of brands, you talk to a lot of Danish brands, and you see the consumer behavior because, yeah, you see a lot of people walking through your doors every day and every second as we speak. What has been the evolution of the ecosystem, and how do you see companies embracing transparency, sustainability, and evolving into it?
First of all, the somewhat depressing news are that alongside all the information to the customer, the sustainability message has been really difficult to communicate. We see growing interest into sustainability, but also for it to coexist with the current pricing environment. And therefore, the sustainability agenda, seen from my perspective, need to sort of coexist with the ongoing matrix of retail that really hasn't changed that much, and that price quality matrix to coexist. I think now I have the speaking opportunity. I would say that it is important that the drive for sustainability comes from within the business, because sustainability to me is not only a legislation issue. I think we would do parts of this anyway. We would continuously focus on making our product better in terms of being more recyclable, and but we would have probably not done so much for the documentation as is required with the legal standards, which we don't know to which extent they're going to be implemented. But really, I mean, I'd say that to be give you a very long answer is that for us, we have done so much that we can't communicate, we can't really handle in a way. I mean, we have 4.5 million different products at our shelves at any given time, and that means just to draw out how massive the documentation issues, even in a much lighter format, still becomes and must be driven from brands within. I'll pause there and I'll leave you to ask another question.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, what I see, what we see here is that also in the communication aspect, there's been, of course, a lot of challenges that have probably, in a way, turned into, yeah, a necessary kind of need to, yeah, to block certain communication. Probably because also some of the language has been outdated because it's also, you know, we still talk about sustainability as sustainability, but the question is also maybe we shouldn't talk about sustainability simply like that. So we need new language and a new way to talk about all of it, which is being regulated. So it's also being written down. And you've seen also the regulation. You were mentioning to me that, you know, you followed also along some of these developments. How are you currently handling it as Magasin?
Well, I mean, we, as I said before, we are doing a lot. Um, we have a desire, even though we're not sure how to communicate that, to make our product better in every aspect by any shape or format. Anything from having got certified, product to, obviously the labor requirement has been there for years now. So I think honestly, Aris, our biggest problem is more on documentation, because we have by our own matrix gotten to a point where we are meeting 70% of target on all products on average. And in some categories, we are where we should be already 100% in terms of certifications on the product, on recyclability, and on the bits. But the documentation part and all the legal parts and where you exactly want to take this is for us a total third-party issue. We will deal with any, and not only on product level, but also on the other ESG matrix. I know it's been postponed, and some of that legality will also be changed. But they will, without a shadow of a doubt, end up in a larger documentation issue on exactly what we're doing there. And finally, don't forget that we also need to, regardless of all the legislation, need to be able to communicate this in a systematic, thorough shape back to the customer, both online and in stores. Easier online, more difficult in a physical product to tell them about that message. And hence why I'm excited about our cooperation, to see how users react, our customers react to that level of detail on the product.
Yeah, exactly. And we've also run a test, right, with one of the brands also that have shown in Magasin. We've created this beta version with Cartel. We presented this in also just a couple of weeks ago in January. I mean, now a couple of months ago, and it's been also interesting to see the initial feedback from the customer, that it's walking in the store and looking at the digital product passport as first version, to also really see how digital product passports would really actually be displayed, and the language and the kind of communication that can be done eventually with the final consumer, and not only see it just as compliance, but looking at it as a customer engagement and communication problem as well.
Well, which it is largely, I mean, it's largely a selling issue that we have on communication, and a systemized way to address this whole issue of that, and in a system that is compliant with all the things that Marie was talking about. She at least gave us an overview of it. It's really hairy, to be honest, once you get into the substance of this.
Yeah, 100%. Eva. So Eva, you've been in panels together for quite a few times now. So Eva, as you know, a pioneer actually of not only in the Danish space, but globally, of everything that has to do with sustainability. You've been one of the key leading pillars of the industry. So you've seen the evolution also of the Danish fashion sustainability system with Global Fashion Agenda and Copenhagen Fashion Week. And Denmark has been also a point that has been recognized globally, where you've brought leaders from around the world to meet in Copenhagen and discuss these topics. So have you seen all of that? What are your thoughts that around the Danish role, but also this evolution that we're seeing in the market?
Thank you, Iris. Yeah, that's a big question, to be honest. I mean, I think when we first embarked on the journey, we almost didn't have a language. And some of you who are old enough to remember, it was called CSR. And then eventually along the way, sustainability sort of found its way into the vocabulary. But I think we even needed to sort of define what it is we were talking about. And I think that's part of also what was some of the, I was thinking, what have we learned? And of course, some of what we've learned and some of the mistakes we made was also that we were treading waters that nobody had done before, and we were testing things. So I think we potentially inspired some companies to sort of walk the path and try out stuff, but it was grabbed, not out of thin air, but, some were testing some things and some were testing other things, and things weren't sort of aligned. And under the headline of sustainability, there was no sort of validation, criteria, assessments in place, which also, as this picked up, and good thing it did, because it then became sort of a buzz, and, fashion wanted to do it, and lots of companies were sort of testing it out with capsule collections where they were testing out new materials, or, it evoked sort of a good sense of companies wanting to look into their transparency of supply chain and got more conscious and about what was happening beyond tier 1 or tier 2, right? So a lot of really good, and I think always with the right intention and motivation, but still new space, right? And then because our industry is a communication industry, and it's all about talking about the products and how they're made and making the difference and your unique USP. Of course, a lot of companies were also communicating about it. And then all of a sudden we were in this space where some were even greenwashing potentially. And I think that created sort of a backlash a little bit. And I think a lot of consumer trust disappeared over some of the later years. And I think that's also what Peter is talking about, is that they, on a shelf and in the trade with the customer situation, how does this become a value proposition? How can we turn this into something that has value? I think at the end of the day, it's the product that sells to the customer. And I think we're getting to a point where customers are expecting companies that they like, or brands that they like, that they also behave nicely and that they try to do their best to minimize their environmental or social footprint. But this is why I'm really excited about all of the legislation. And I know a lot of companies out there currently feel, Peter called it hairy. It's very difficult. Even this Marie scratching the surface of the volume of things that are coming at fashion right now from a legislative perspective. Obviously, it's a big deal. And I know that a lot of CSOs are currently feeling that they're more accountants, and that it wasn't what they signed up for. They were there to make innovative solutions and help businesses, thrive and become better. And all of a sudden, they're just doing tons of reporting and compliance. And that's partly also one of the reasons I think what you guys do at Renoon is just so incredibly helpful for the industry, because you can actually help the CSOs break this down and make it something that is actually doable for them, even with small teams, and even if we're in a sustainability recession at the moment, in a way. But it is what we need. We really need a baseline. We need legislation to sort of say this is the mandatory steps. These are the same assessments and methods that everybody used to prove what's in their product, to disclose what's in them. And this is the kind of transparency tools and guidance that I actually think will help customers. I still think they will buy the product more than the sustainability impact, but I really think that it's that this is the needed tools for us to come above this moment of having sort of damaged the reputation a little bit of sustainability, you can say, because a lot of customers were sort of, not really trusting what they see, not 100% sure what does it mean when a rubber boot is called vegan. Yeah, hell yeah, it's vegan, but is that the right title to put to it? So I think, yeah, I'm actually, I know people feel overwhelmed and that it's kind of annoying as it's being implemented, but with technology at our hand, I really think it's what our industry needs. And I'm just very happy that it's coming.
Yeah, sometimes to go forward, we need to go a little bit back so that we can get more force to continue.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, we need a level playing field, right? And because otherwise it has been some companies trying to pave the way and do the right thing, but not being rewarded for it. Actually, sometimes even being slaughtered for it. So I actually think that this is a tool that can help everybody create validated, trusted sources of information and some kind of, normalizing and also having a level playing field, because then everybody has to disclose what's under the hood. And
Do you think,
it kind of feels more fair.
yeah, do you think it's actually a disadvantage to test and try new things at this point?
I don't think it has been a disadvantage for Denmark to sort of lead the way on this. I think it came from a sense of, I think our country and the rest of the Nordic countries stem from a cultural history of, taking care of society and, thinking beyond our own borders. And so it was sort of a credible case from a branding perspective from Denmark to sort of lead the way on the agenda of developing this language and taking a lead. But it's definitely doesn't come cheap to try to pave the way. You take a lot of blows and yeah, you learn a lot and probably, good and bad, but on behalf of others as well. But I think where we are right now, we really need these kind of tools, and we need this to be legislation that goes beyond borders. And because our industry fashion works globally, it crosses borders both on its supply chain and its distribution when we're exporting and selling. So we really need to work on this globally and internationally and ideally on a global scale, but for now on an EU level.
Yeah. When it comes to aggregations as well, for example, there's different initiatives of requirements that have been kind of also set from the market itself before legislation was coming in, to kind of also really push companies to be more transparent and do the work that also Marie was listing in the right way, very practically. What do you think the evolution of these requirements will be?
I mean, I think we saw the industry trying to take certain steps. I think retailers, also Zalando, for instance, was trying to sort of mark products on their website to say these are more sustainable, but that has now been taken off because of legislation. Sustainability requirements from fashion weeks is coming as well. I think it's really great to see when things are actually coming from the industry. I would much rather that we could solve this on our own and we didn't need mom and dad, the policymakers, to sort of solve it for us as an industry. But it just seems like it's too difficult to steer, and it won't. We've seen that it doesn't apply to everyone, or not everybody's sort of meeting the requirements, and therefore it becomes more difficult for the ones who try to do the good thing, because the return on investment isn't sort of paid back immediately. So in a way, that's why we do need legislation to make it, to incentivize, I would say, those who want to move and do the good things and do the right things. Because we are still looking at an industry that is one of the world's largest and with one of the world's largest footprint of resources spent, anything from land to water to CO2 and chemicals and labor and everything. I mean, name an issue, fashion has it. So there is really a lot we still need to do. So therefore, I think, good thing with industry requirements and assessments, and then supported by legislation is what is needed for this to really pull through.
And what we mentioned, I think you about that this is also very interesting to see on your perspective on this. And as you rightfully mentioned, it's also complicated, right? Because there's a lot of legislation, as Marie presented. When it comes to actually then implementing all of the tools, what we also see with Renoon is that a lot of companies are struggling. Sometimes they actually come to us because they've kind of think they've decided they want to get a tool, but then when we start talking, we realize that they haven't really, like, they have no understanding, or it's still very confusing for them on what to do. And it's going to be the case, right, for a lot of companies, also small, medium, and larger ones. Marie, what is your role with DM&T also on helping members, but also what are you seeing the challenges being most common challenges that maybe, others listening today can relate to.
I think just a few words about DM&T, just so that everyone know who we are. We are the industry association for Danish fashion and textile companies, and we represent Danish fashion and textile companies politically and else. So I think our work, to answer your question, there are two types of support that we provide for our members, and one thing is the political influencing, which is something that we are spending more and more time on. And it's been an interesting development, because going back 3-4 years, 5 years time, as Eva also spoke to, there was no legislation, and the industry has been going under the radar, so to speak, from a legislative perspective, which also means that the industry has not been very politically engaged, not very aware about political discussions, not being aware about how important it is to engage with policymakers, key opinion leaders, etc. And I think that we more and more, we do see, despite the new, you can say, political climate, etc., there is an awakening within the industry that they have to engage politically, because otherwise legislation will be developed without, from EU decision makers who do not necessarily have knowledge and understanding of how the industry actually works. So even though we sometimes struggle to find the political engagement, because it's extremely difficult to do the influencing work, etc., we still see that more and more are interested in trying to understand how do we actually go into trying to understand and influence and engage with decision makers. So that is an area where we spend more and more time, and we didn't do so 2 years, 3 years ago. And another example that I would mention is this, we see a tendency to, sustainability is becoming compliance work because it's becoming legislation. And it's more and more companies are spending time on the reporting, the documentation, and meeting the requirements from customers and local member state markets. And in some cases, it takes away the attention and the resources to actually do the change, finding the better products, because they have limited resources. It's difficult times, and then the resources they do have are spent on compliance. So we are trying to support them in finding systems that can help them, but also prioritizing, because there is so much coming. How do I manage all these requirements, these expectations? What do I have to, what is need to, and what is nice to? So these are some of the, some of the key questions and key concerns that we get from our members, in addition to the policy work that I spoke to in the beginning of the answer or the question.
So, Michael, you can actually also respond to this as a brand, having worked within brand specifically. So this question of barrier, deciding whether sustainability is pure compliance or can be, an asset, an advantage as a company, as a brand. So Michael, also by now, I'm not introducing you because we've done so many panels also together, but Michael is an investor, CEO, and he has been, seeing a lot of companies, not only in the fashion space, but outside, but also seeing how, to bring Danish brands in the global ecosystem and the global spotlight. And that requires, different decisions that you need to make, as a company. What is your perspective on all of this?
All right, just had to unmute the classic. Well, thank you very much, Iris. It's great to be part of these panel talks, which we've done both, live and online. So where should I start in this whole? Well, I think first of all, what I have really observed from the beginning is that the brands that really succeed is the one that takes a really proactive approach in navigating the different sustainability requirements. And it's companies who are integrating sustainability into their operational frameworks to secure alignment between all departments, from design, production, and marketing as well, which I see as quite important. For example, at Madebike, we really learned from almost the beginning of the company that embedding sustainability into the brand's DNA had a huge impact in the native and the operating strategy for the company in general going forward. The same also at H2O Fagerholt. As we expanded into new international markets, we really recognize the importance of building a robust supply chain transparency and collaborating closely with all our different retail partners around the world on these different sustainability criteria. And also at H2O Fagerholt, in the fashion industry, I also learned or saw very upfront the impact of these sustainability requirements, both from Copenhagen Fashion Week, but also from Zalando, as Eva also mentioned before, which had these sustainability requirement that we as a smaller company simply could not manage or had the resources in-house to deal with. So that was already something that I saw pretty much uphand, how the impact could be that you didn't have your back end in control. And especially here, I've seen strong success also with brands that partner early stages with third partners to help structure the data and build transparency into their DNA, rather than trying to build these in-house departments from scratch when you're a small company, which can be both very, very expensive, but also take a lot of time from actually building a brand and a company. So I think to end off with, I think ultimately it's about prioritization. Brands that stop treating sustainability as an external pressure or start viewing it as a part of the brand's future is the ones that make real progress in this area.
We hope. Yeah, thank you, Michael. I think it's actually really inspiring to see indeed the different companies that you've seen, and in a way, what I hear also from everybody right now, and I'm coming back from a trip to Bucharest. That's actually now becoming a hub for Eastern Europe, and really trying to see how to help companies also that are in the growth stage to also prioritize sustainability or really embed it. And what we've been seeing also, and I've been seeing in the chats today, but also I see this pattern coming along, is that sustainability first was seen as, one word, and then you were trying to do different things. But at the same time, it's kind of seeing it as a pyramid of a Maslow. So you start from the very bottom, where it's regulation, legislation, and getting the house in order, until getting like to different steps, until like very exciting steps and exciting projects. And I think Eva, also you have also been currently working in a new project also with Be Wild, which I think it's also very, very interesting. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that as well, and how do you think that plays a role also in this topic?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a different route, but in some ways it ties back in. So I think in the whole sort of environmental climate movement, we've sort of missed a little bit the impact on nature. And it feels like everybody's looking at CO2, but really nature plays such a pivotal role in our existence, not least for our food, but also for this industry. 30-40% of our materials are sourced directly from nature. However, when you start talking about soil or complicated words like biodiversity, people don't really, they don't always connect. And that's sort of what we wanted to do with the Be Wild, which the campaign is called, and it's coming out soon, is really to connect with companies that are powered by pollen. So food, beverage, fashion, beauty, lots of these industries are dependent on nature and their supply chains, and want to figure out a way where we can connect humans back with nature, and how we can make it a more relevant agenda. And again, we're sort of treading new waters again, so we might get slammed at some point, be accused of yellow washing instead of greenwashing or whatever. I do think that there's just this sense of understanding that every product that we have in our hands, in our lives, and products that we produce as the fashion industry comes from somewhere, and that we need to have more respect for the materials and where they come from, and understand and appreciate the extraction and an impact that it often has on our planet, whether they're fossil fuel based or they're nature based. It all has an impact. And I think understanding that, the digital product passport is actually, helping us understand much more sort of the granular parts of what is in a product. Because normally we would just buy the red jacket because it looked amazing and we were going out on Saturday or whatever. But now actually understanding that you can go into the depth of it and understanding what it's made of, and potentially even if brands want to disclose a little bit of the story, or even taking us to the field where it's sourced, if it's a good story. And, so I think there's many opportunities to actually trace back and make us all become more aware. And I think that will hopefully bring back also a sense of value to products, because I think it's another issue our industry is facing, sort of going down another track, and we probably don't have time to discuss price, but I think shelf life and price and value of fashion products has decreased. And it's partly our own, it's our own fault. We push out products way too early instead of giving them the shelf life when the product is right for the season. We put out pre-spring in November. Why? When we have perfectly suited, winter products on the shelves, and, we go on sale way too much. And I think so that whole sort of, degrading the price points and the wastefulness of fashion, if you constantly sort of swap and make it new, rather than as retailers keeping the right price for a longer time and giving product a longer shelf life. So it's sort of mechanics that we've created ourselves as an industry. But I do think that if we could come back to a place where we actually value what we have, and that we understand and appreciate that all fibers come from somewhere, and they have a meaning, and they have an impact, and they can last longer, and they can come back in recycled systems and so on. So it all relates back to stories. So sort of a bit of a detour, but bees and pollinators fit into that, and the whole nature impact as well.
Peter maybe has a different perspective from running a
retailer.
Exactly.
I do see. I don't disagree, but I'm also very realistic about that some cycles are difficult to go back into the good old days, right? I mean, it is what it is. But I think that you can really work on the existing cycle and still achieve a lot. My observation is actually that a lot of brands are doing a lot that they don't tell, because the focus on not greenwashing is perhaps a bigger topic than it is telling you about all the good things that the industry is doing. And don't forget that most of these people that build brands are not evil people. They are actually good people that is trying to do good and make money. I don't necessarily subscribe 100% to being so afraid of that somebody comes with a perhaps a little aggressive climate statement, rather than we push the whole agenda forward. And I'm at least aware of some very large retailers that don't communicate and even don't sign their clothes on the fact that they are using partly recycled material in them. So I think that is equally wrong. And therefore, at a time where we get some standardized reporting and ability to communicate that back to the consumer, we are also able to address the value perspective of the recyclability of the product, or whatever the message is, because I know it's not one message, and you're totally right, Eva, and Michael too, right? that it's a complicated statement on many good factors in a product. That was a long speech again, Iris, but
very, very much.
I think it is important to underline that the industry is largely actually not made up of cheap Temu products, but it's largely made up of everything else.
Yeah. And it's curious because we also have a question right from the audience. We have a few questions actually, but one from Sharon Silberman. Hi, Sharon. She asks if indeed there is a parallel between the legislator who does not understand fashion and textile, which Peter is laughing, so I guess you agree with that statement. And on the other side, the brands who are not needing to comply to legislation that has also is now involving numbers and science-based and accounting that is not associated with profit. So how do you actually balance this, need to pull leaders in and at the same time consumers in at the heart, the heart of this change? Peter, maybe you have an opinion on this.
I do, and it's really. I mean, don't forget how many brands we're talking about, and I also know that Michael, you've been through some journeys there yourself. It depends on the product. I mean, we as a company are trying to do good whilst we're not talking about it, because we are afraid what's going to happen with it. So we sort of discreetly are moving on a greener journey in lack of the correct language. And I think that a lot of people are doing that. I also lack tools to communicate to the consumer what the impacts are. If you go and buy eggs today in Denmark, they have, 1, 2, or 3 hearts on them. We don't currently have that message on textile, and I think we need some grades on products that qualifies the consumer to give that to give them a better ability to judge on individual products. But it has to be seen in the context of what people are buying. It's a little bit different when you're buying pots and pans, and how long they can last in out of the production cost. And there are so many topics of the whole green agenda that needs to be attached to that. So that's why it's a little bit more complex.
Yeah. We also have a question, actually. It's a very specific question for Marie. So we go back into the actual details of DM&T and how, if there's any standards. So this question is from Eleanor Gale. If you have an overview of the standards adoption among members, or if you're also, I guess, curious also from my end, if there's any standards that you're adopting internally, for example, GS1, etc. There's initiatives happening also on the private side. So
yes, we don't have an overview of the GS1 standards. We don't have that. We have an overview of certifications, sustainability initiatives, product certifications, but also company certifications, which they use or are members of. We do an annual survey where we ask our members on a number of different questions on their sustainability and ESG work. So we do have some information on the product certification initiatives, but also what kind of durability standards that they use. But we haven't asked about the GS1 standards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think also with the differences in standardizations and standards, it's an interesting, of course, topic to continue to keep an eye on. We have a lot of questions also that we have here, but for the sake of time, something I wanted to also highlight is actually a work that we've been doing also with Eva, Michael, and actually Marie. Everybody's in. We're just missing you, Peter, inside of this report that we actually launched in January. So this actually is a report that also we really wanted to measure the heat and temperature of the industry. So we went around 4 different cities. So we did Copenhagen, Paris, Amsterdam, and Milan, to really see how the companies at the end of last year were preparing for legislation. We're looking into sustainability. And I have to say that we're already seeing some shifts and changes in the temperature. And I think what was interesting was a few quotes also from Eva that I wanted to share, is that, yeah, I think this is a very strong also statement from Eva per se, that, of accountability within the industry. And as you said, it's about leveling playing fields. And the other one, it's shifting perspective into, that engaging storytelling, which I think also Peter now mentioned that it's hard to do and hard to utilize and communicate. Eva, do you see any changes from this?
No, I think I would still stand by my statements. I think it is coming closer, and I think more and more companies are trying to sort of grapple and figure out how they fit into this whole scheme of regulations and all of the compliance they need to deliver on. And I think more and more are waking up to that they need networks, they need associations like Danish Fashion and Textiles and others to support them and understand. But I also think we felt in the physical seminars or conferences that companies were really keen to talk to each other. And there really is a need to sort of share amongst each other the challenges that they're facing. And it was also, I think it was quite rewarding to see that they're very different journeys that they're all on, but they're like what Peter says, they're trying to do that. They're trying to do their best. Most players here are really trying to do the right thing and do it in a good way, but still, compromise on the revenue of businesses. And we are in a tight situation at the moment. But I think what is really exciting is actually the technology tools that are coming at hand and that can actually help a lot of these companies break this down and make it much, much more easy for them to overcome. And potentially, if they have good marketing teams on board, they can also take some of this insight and data, which will also be new and exciting for them, and turn it into something that can actually build the storytelling around each product. So I think it is an exciting moment. And if you sort of come over the hurdle of the first, hill of data collection and sort of getting that overview, you're looking into something that's actually a blue ocean of exciting, opportunities to really develop this and for the industry to thrive in this and for consumers to trust what they buy.
Yeah. With that note, very exciting note, I want to actually thank everyone. I'll actually also leave the link to the full report if anybody wants to actually see it and download it. You can also find it on our website. And on the note of actually elevating also the companies who are, trying to do good and trying to do their best and implementing some of these technologies, we actually have one of the case studies with Arnit Studios. They're a Milan-based brand, but we just launched their case. It really shows the story of the brand and how they've done a few things to implement technologies within their digitalization of supply chain efforts and communication to the end customer. So it's really exciting to share that with you. I want to thank you, Peter, Michael, Eva, and Marie, for being here and sharing also your very, very valuable stories and insights. And I see you in Copenhagen actually next week, so I'll be there. So so we see each other. So thank you, everyone.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Iris.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.